Free agency caused all hell to break loose among the running back position, so these rankings are all shook up from what they would have been just a couple months ago. Let's dive right into it here on the ADP Average Youth Podcast. So guys, this is our second episode of tiers and rankings following the NFL free agency. I did quarterbacks just the other day. You can check that out right here as well. Put the link down in the description below. This is running backs, and running backs is a really fragile, very topsy-turvy position in a normal year anyway. There's going to be tons of turnover year in and year out this position. Mid-season, it's one that's going to change a whole lot because of injuries and bad play, players aging out. This year in particular, though, it's going to be a little extra crazy because this free agency, we had so many players change teams. And just thinking about, like last season's ADP, you'd have like Saquon and Eckler, so many of these guys really highly ranked, Josh Jacobs, right? And now they're going to be on new teams. So that's going to really change up these rankings quite a bit. So let's go through these. Don't focus too much on those exact numbers. Focus a bit more on the tiers that these guys are in right now. And again, a quick reminder, I'm not including anyone who's not currently on an NFL team. So any rookies, not going to be a part of this list. So check back in about a month from now, and we'll update things once we have those landing spots. All right, so that top tier of running backs, I got 4 guys in that one. You could argue it's kind of a one-man tier and then 2 through 3 after that, but I lumped them all into one for the purposes of this exercise. It's Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Breece Hall. These are 4 guys who all, I think, can absolutely be the RB1. McCaffrey, of course, he's shown it before. Bijan, to me, was maybe the biggest winner of NFL free agency by getting Kirk Cousins in there, just a better offense. Getting Arthur Smith also out of the picture. Hopefully Bijan just gets to really hoard that work more and more. Very exciting for Bijan. McCaffrey, not a whole lot to say. He's Christian McCaffrey. As long as he stays healthy, there's really no reason to expect him to fall off a cliff. Now, at his age, he could. And that's kind of why I put him in this tier and not just on his own above it. He could. That can happen, but to me, he's still the number 1 player. Jahmyr Gibbs, it's like DeAndre Swift if he were good. I think that he can do a whole lot of things on the ground and through the air. A really good Detroit Lions offense, and he should fully eclipse David Montgomery this season after kind of a split backfield last year. D-Mon still getting a ton of touchdowns. I'd expect more and more of that to go towards Gibbs in year 2. And then lastly, Breece Hall. He showed what he could do as a rookie quite a bit. He showed it again kind of throughout last season as he came back from the torn ACL. Now here you are, a full season removed from that torn ACL injury. Fully expect him to be good to go and could be very much a top-tier running back this season. Next is a 2-man tier in tier 2. It's Saquon, Barkley, and it's Jonathan Taylor. The reason it's just these 2 are because these are the 2 guys who I feel most confident in being able to also finish first, but I do just have a few question marks with each of them, right? With Jonathan Taylor, you're not going to get any passing downs work with Anthony Richardson at quarterback. You worry a bit about touchdowns even getting snapped away from him by Anthony Richardson. You worry about the offense as a whole. Saquon Barkley, very similar situation now that he's in Philly. Really good offensive line. Should have some scoring opportunities, probably even more so than he did in New York, really. But you do have to worry about the Jalen Hurts tush push, taking some of those away. And he's obviously also not going to catch passes in this offense. They don't really throw the ball at all to the running backs. And so that's a part of Saquon's game that just kind of goes away now. Also, both these guys, especially Barkley, more so than Taylor really, but at an age now where you just start to kind of, take note of it. Don't be too worried yet. Probably next year we get a little bit, antenna raised, but just worth taking note this year. But both these 2 guys have massive upside. Tier 3 is a 3-player tier, and that's Kyren Williams, Travis Etienne, and Josh Jacobs. Let's start with Kyren Williams first here. Of course, he played really, really well last year for the Rams. One of the biggest free agent pickups in fantasy. One of the biggest breakouts in fantasy last year. He helped a lot of people win a lot of leagues. Him, Etienne, and Jacobs, I think there's a bit of a common thread here with these 3 guys, and lack of monster performances, I guess, lack of true explosiveness, but big workloads. And no one should be taking work away from these 3 guys. I don't totally love any of them in these spots and in these situations, but the workload should be really, really strong for these guys, and they are good enough to really capitalize on it. And with some good touchdown luck, they can vault their way into that top tier guys. With some bad touchdown luck, they're going to be more of this low-end RB1 kind of spot. So to me, that's kind of what's going to come down to separate these three guys. I go Kyren, Etienne, Jacobs for now. My goodness, it's late March right now, so these rankings are going to change a whole lot between now and August. But for now, that's where I'm at. And before we get into Tier 4, just a quick reminder to everybody to please do subscribe to whatever platform it is that you're watching or listening to this on. If you're on YouTube, be sure to click that thumbs up button, ring the bell for notifications, and subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to it on a podcast platform, hey, by all means, be sure to follow and subscribe to those as well. Check out that YouTube channel. If you're on YouTube, check out the audio. If you're driving in the car or something, then just listening to the podcast would be just as good, right? And that gives you kind of the opportunity to listen to it, even if you can see my beautiful face and all these fun little graphics I put down below. So Tier 4, this is a fun tier for sure. This is a group of players where the ceiling's high, the workloads are questionable, and the points really do matter in this one. So you got James Cook, Devon Achane, Ken Walker, and Isaiah Pacheco. All four of these guys, I can see things going really, really well for them, right? Achane showed what he can do with limited touches last year. If he gets even more touches, then my goodness, the sky's the limit. Same thing with James Cook, and the offense in Buffalo changing more and more in his favor is a really, really good sign for him. Ken Walker, he's kind of shown it 2 years in a row that he can be a big play threat. And Pacheco, being on the Chiefs offense, of course, is always going to bring in some opportunities to score because they're scoring so much. But all four of these guys, I'm also a little bit worried they'll kind of have their lumps, right? James Cook, not really a feature back body style. Same with Achane, right? So I'm worried about limited touches or being able to hold up throughout the entire season. Ken Walker, I'm still worried about Zach Charbonnet kind of lingering in the background on him, being able to take that job. Also, new coaching staff could mix them things up, may not be running the ball quite as much as what they have in the past. And Isaiah Pacheco, he doesn't catch passes, and I'm still expecting to bring in some competition in the backfield here. CEH, free agent, he's out there still, same with McKinnon. I fully expect Kansas City to bring in someone of note in the draft probably now. So I'm just a little bit getting out in front of it there with Pacheco. If they don't bring in anybody in like rounds 2 or 3, I'll feel a little bit better about Pacheco, and he probably moves to the top of this tier. But he still doesn't catch passes, though, and that still is a concern, especially in the PPR world that we live in today. That's one thing that I would just really like to see be added to his game that I just don't think is going to happen. All four of these guys, though, I'm okay with them as my RB1 if I can get him like in, just spitball in late round 3 would feel like the spot for it, right? Maybe I have 2 wide receivers already. And I'm okay with maybe taking one of those guys. I have no idea on ADP data at the moment. No, I've not done any mocks, so just kind of spitballing on those kind of ranges. But I would definitely rather be doing some wide receivers over these guys if it's too early. All right, and then we get to the clump of running backs, guys. I'm going to have to look down at my notes here to read off all these names because Tier 5, it's a big one. So you got Alvin Kamara, David Montgomery, Rachaad White, Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, Javonte Williams, Raheem Mostert, Najee Harris, Zamir White, and Tony Pollard. That's 10 guys that I have in Tier 5 here. And the reason it is such a clob of players is because this is kind of that trap back range. That's a term that's really been growing more and more. I first heard it on the CBS Fantasy Football podcast. I think it was probably about, was it 4 years ago now, I guess? 2020 season? I guess is kind of when it really started to pick up a little bit of steam. And what those backs traditionally are non-pass catchers and kind of aging running backs. And I think a lot of these guys fall into one of those two camps. Not necessarily all of them fall into both. Most of them fall into one or the other, though, not really being a pass catcher or starting to age up. And those aging running backs, man, I am terrified of that whole group, right? That's where Kamara, that's Demont, that's Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, Raheem Mostert. I'd even kind of slide Tony Pollard into that range already at this point, which is crazy to think. Kind of guys who are getting up there a little bit in age, have had a lot of workload or injury questions. And if you slide injury questions in there also, you have to include Javonte Williams, right, with the injury issues he's had. These guys, it's a club of players who have different issues, but all these issues concern me a lot. Alvin Kamara, age. David Montgomery, workload going more and more to Gibbs. He's very much reliant on touchdowns. That scares me a little bit. Rachaad White, bad offense. It played really well last year, but I still have concerns about this Tampa Bay offense going into 2024 where if touchdowns totally go away from him, if anyone else gets brought in, because Rachaad White, not a very productive runner. So if they start to give any of that workload to somebody else, that other guy could take that workload entirely from him, which means he's just on the field less. So those passing down work start to go away. Derrick Henry. Of course, age is the big question there, and really it's the only question with him. With age comes injury questions, sure, but age is really the thing for him. Joe Mixon, similarly so. Age absolutely is the question for him as well. He's actually stayed pretty healthy for the last few years, but injuries have been an issue for him before. Javonte Williams, a little bit of that injury question I mentioned before, but also bad offense though in Denver, like dirt worse in the league, kind of bad. Raheem Mostert, it's age. The fact that we had the major spike year last year, but it kind of came out of nowhere with Raheem Mostert. And so just being, I think he's 31 years old now, or was he 31 last year? He's an older dude. He's older than me. And so if you're older than me, you probably shouldn't be a running back in the NFL anymore. Zamir White, I'm actually pretty excited about. But again, like Javonte, really bad offense. Really, really bad offense. So that has me concerned there as well. Najee Harris, a bit of a split workload concern with him and Jaylen Warren. Also an offense I don't expect to score a whole lot of points. And also passing work concerns. Whether it's Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, you can check out. I have a video about that as well. But passing down work, I'm concerned with either of those two at quarterback, and then also scoring touchdowns concern. Tony Pollard, workload concerns for sure. He seems to be like a prime candidate to kind of be overtaken by Tajee Spears. And speaking of Tajee Spears, here's the club part 2 of running backs. So I got to look down my notes again for this one, guys, because this last one was 10. I think this one's 11 players, I think it is. We got DeAndre Swift, Ramondre Stevenson, Jaylen Warren, Tajee Spears, Austin Eckler, James Conner, Aaron Jones, Nick Chubb, Zach Moss, Brian Robinson, Chuba Hubbard, and Devin Singletary. So that's a whole lot of players there as well. And it really is kind of the same guys as the previous group with less upside, though. That previous group of players, I could see upside for all of them, though, where if things do go right, it will go right for a couple of them. They bring back RB1 production, right? Alvin Kamara, Joe Mixon, Najee Harris. If things break these guys' way, I totally see RB1 season potential. Not RB1 overall, but RB, top 12. These guys I don't. But these guys I see more RB2 potential, but I just don't see it with RB1. And I have basically the same level of concern with these guys just totally losing out as I do with the guys before this. So, DeAndre Swift, he's just never really been that good of a rusher. Last year's the only example of it, and he was on the Eagles, who were an excellent rushing team with an excellent offensive line. He was a good rusher. He wasn't great, but he was good. In Chicago, he does have weapons around him, so maybe it's a good offense that does score a lot of points. So that'd be great for him, but I just worry a bit about him really hanging on to that job in its entirety. Ramondre Stevenson, he's another one whose the production's been a little bit shaky, and those guys always scare me, when you're kind of a mid-round pick and the production's not totally there for a couple of years. I really worry about you playing your way off the field. The next two guys are ones who I'm actually pretty excited about in this range. That's Jaylen Warren and Tajee Spears, both the backups in their offense at the time of recording. Both will probably be the backups going into week 1, but both guys who I think can overtake the starters probably won't crack top 12 in the NFL in fantasy football, but they both could be top 24 guys for you if they take over those roles in particular. So then we have just old guys, right? We have Austin Eckler, we have Nick Chubb, James Conner, and Aaron Jones. All four of these guys, I'm very worried about just the cliff, having already passed them all by, potentially. Aaron Jones looked really good late last year, and James Conner was actually pretty good last year. But Nick Chubb, unfortunately, coming off his group injury. Austin Eckler coming off just an awful year. I'm very worried about those guys. And then you got at the end of this tier with Zach Moss, Brian Robinson, Chuba Hubbard, and Devin Singletary. Guys who I expect going into the season should get really strong workloads, but they may play their way out of those workloads potentially. None of them are on offenses, except for Moss. None of them are on offenses that particularly excite me very much for scoring potential. Also, none of them major pass catchers either. And so just a lot of red flags for those last four guys. On this last tier of running backs, I'm not going to go through the names. You can see them on screen if you're watching on YouTube. But if not, if you're just listening to the podcast, it's a bunch of the backups, right? It's all the handcuffs. It's your guys like Chase Brown, Zach Charbonnet, Tyler Algier. Kendra Miller. It's basically the rest of the NFL worth of handcuffs. I did put Gus Edwards in this group, despite him currently being the starter in LA, because I think it's pretty much foregone conclusion that they will draft a guy very early on. So I felt confident putting Gus into this range. Jaleel McLaughlin is in this group of guys. So it's just the handcuffs who I'm okay with drafting as backups. And, unfortunately, the game we play in does have injuries happen to players. And so those injuries do open up opportunities. And so you have to be ready to take advantage when those opportunities come up. And these are a lot of the players who can take advantage of those opportunities. So those were my first pass at running back rankings for 2024. These are going to change a ton, right? Who knows? By mid-July, I may be sitting here going, I'm the Chuba Hubbard guy, right? Like, a lot can change in between now and when we actually start to do the draft. But just kind of first lay of the land, though, I will say, I think kind of as an overview, of course, we feel really great about that top squad of guys. Feel really strongly about Taylor and Saquon. The next three I'm not quite as excited about as I think I usually am for tier 3 of running backs. And then it really falls off quick after that, right? Then you have that kind of nebulous group there, the Cook, Walker, Pacheco, Achane, that group of guys where it's like I see the definite upside, but the cost is really high. And then it just basically gets real scary real fast. There will be guys within that gumball of players that I look at and say, this individual player I'm excited about. Zamir White is probably the guy right now I'd point to in that kind of regard, where I kind of see things lining up pretty good for him right now. Kind of like David Montgomery was a year ago for me. He was kind of in this range last year too. And I really just like the setup for him and what I thought he could be. Same thing with that second group of guys. I think my gut tells me Tyjae Spears is going to overtake Tony Pollard in Tennessee, and he's going to be a real value. But unfortunately, I feel like I just can't rank him all that high at the moment, right? Because Tony Pollard is there in Tennessee. He's the one they seeked out and added to the offense. So, guys, take a look at those rankings. What did you think? Where do you see as potential values? What sort of ranges are you going to be targeting? Are there any players that you think I'm just dead wrong about? Or are there players you totally agree with and you say, yeah, I think that you are right on the money with these players as well? Let me know in the comments down below. We will see you guys next time as we go through some wide receivers.